Hello, and welcome to this episode of Self-Made. I'm your host, D. Brown, CEO. On the last episode, I was interviewing Chief Eric Echevarria, and we're going to continue this conversation. We were just diving into you becoming the chief of the Peoria Police Department. So take me back and kind of walk me through that interview day.
Yeah, it was remote. On top of it, it was remote because we were going through COVID at the time.
Yep.
And I had to sit behind a computer screen and a camera for about 3 hours and go through this. It was a very rigorous process, but it was a great process because they did exactly what I think should be done, is have the community voice there and the community stakeholders that need to know and want to have input on who's leading their agency, who's leading their department. This is one of the two high-profile positions in a city: the mayor and the chief of police. Right. You as a police officer and the powers that you have to put somebody in jail and control somebody's movement and all that. It's very important to have the right leadership in place, and the community should have a voice in that. So it was a very rigorous process. I'm glad I was done with it. But then I moved on to the next process, was with the mayor and the city manager, and eventually was offered the position, which was an exciting moment. Prior to that same day, I came to Peoria. That one was in person, and they gave me a tour of the city. They had me ride with an officer, kind of get a lay of the land a little bit while they interviewed a second person.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. It was interesting being able to go out and talk to the officers and get some input from them and see what they were looking for and what they wanted to see, and if I was fortunate enough to get the position, and it worked out. It worked out.
So take me to that first day on the job. What were some of the things that you knew day one you wanted to implement?
I'll tell you, day one wasn't in the office. Day one, I came out and worked midnight shift. I was supposed to ride with a specific officer, but then this young other officer walks in, and she says, "Hey, Chief," and she started talking to me. I said, "No, okay." Oftentimes people don't want to talk to the chief.
Right.
She connected. I said, "I'm riding with you. Let's go."
Yeah.
So I rolled along with Officer McAfee. And I was supposed to get with this other officer. It was a very busy night, and we are running from call to call to call. I said, "Just do what you do. Don't worry about me.
Yeah.
Just do what you do. I'm just here to observe."
Yeah.
I was just before I can jump in the car with the other officer we were going to meet. He calls out on a stop. Next thing you know, he gets shot.
Oh, Lord.
This is my first day.
First day.
He gets shot. Ends up getting shot in the ankle. There's a fight that breaks out, somebody shoots, and then starts shooting at his squad car. And the seat I was supposed to be in, there was a round sitting on it later.
Oh, wow.
So that was my first day. But some of the things that I got to observe was, one, excellent police department. They knew how to do police work. I showed up to the fight that was happening while the officer got shot, and were breaking things up, and I could see the professionalism and the control that the officers had to not just be excessive in their force.
Yeah.
Right. We had an officer that got shot. We didn't shoot anybody. Right. So I immediately knew that what I saw when I pulled up, officers had things contained. The public information officer was on scene. I said, these officers know what they're doing. The team knows how to get together, take control, and be professional. And I like that. What I noticed then, moving forward from there, is some of the needs that we needed at the department. As I walked around, was we have about 100 officers on our patrol shift, and there was 2 computers for them to write reports on inside the station. Inefficient, ineffective.
Right.
And it was time that we needed to fix that. That's been fixed since, right? There's 14 now. There's a whole report writing there. I had detectives who were on flip phones. This is a year and a half ago, on flip phones.
I didn't know they still made flip phones.
I didn't know either, but Peoria must have had a contract with somebody for flip phones. And I was like, how are we getting work done when we live in a world of technology?
Right.
And a lot of crimes are solved through the use of technology.
That's right.
And so we've since improved that. The whole department now has department-issued iPhones.
Yeah.
And just some of the technology, old body cameras that needed to be updated, we've since updated that and went to an Axon system, this top-of-the-line system that we moved to now. And so we needed to improve things. There's construction that needed to happen inside the department and things that needed to be redone and moved. And we're still working through some other things there where we're going to restructure some other areas in the agency. Had an evidence room that was about to explode out of its seams. I had to create a whole nother area it's very important. We can't have evidence that's going to get tainted or lost.
Right.
And so just things internally that just needed to be fixed and improved upon, and we've been able to do that. So there's some simple things, as you got to talk to the officers is like, hey, why can't we wear shorts? Like police officers, there's department issues. We can uniform shorts. And you want your officers who are on patrol to just be able, they work in a lot of long hours. The summer gets hot. It's already hot with this 15-pound vest on and everything else you're wearing. Right. But what can we do to make our officers a little bit more comfortable? Because I want officers to be happy when they're dealing with the public. Right. Whatever I can do to make them comfortable and be happy but still be professional, that's what we want to do. So we made some changes in the uniform policy. We made some changes in some other policies in the agency to make things a little bit smoother. Yeah. And so it's just kind of making an agency more efficient and more effective. Yeah. And so what we're working on now is really the mental health and behavioral health side of it. We're in the process of creating a victim and community services unit where we're going to hire 8 mental health and behavioral health social workers, along with 5 interns, an admin aide, a director, that will respond to calls that require that versus just the police responding to that. We want to be more efficient, more effective in how we deal with our community. Right. It's not easy, right? It's people policing people. Yeah. So how do we get the best services, the best customer service to our community, and the best possible services to have the best solutions possible and the best resolutions possible? Right. And so we're in that process currently of implementing that.
Now that's important because you hear so many stories around the country where police agencies are not equipped to deal with mental health emergencies and situations. Correct. And police officers typically are there to enforce the laws and not really deal with those type of issues. So I think that's really great that you're implementing that type of program and something that I think agencies around the country should try to implement. I know there are larger agencies that tend to have those services, but smaller agencies, not so much. Yeah. Along your journey, who has been some of the individuals that have either mentored you or been instrumental in your successful journey to chief?
Wow. Might be a long list of people there. Obviously, I'll say my parents, number one. Yeah. Right? My parents, prime examples of what a parent should be. My father, of what a man should be. I can tell you that there's a lot of things when we talk about serving and servant leadership that I saw from my father. That when I was young, I questioned. I'm like, what are you doing? Yeah. I can't tell you the amount of times that my father gave away a suit to a person in need. My father owned properties. He always had a vacant unit. It was never vacant. There was always somebody living in it. To this day, that lives in there that is experiencing homelessness. And that's just, without telling anybody, it's just what he does. Yeah. When you're young, you question some of those things. What are you doing? Like, they can work, they can help themselves, and you wonder, but the example he said is, we're here to help people. We're here to be a catalyst for change, and he proved it. And it's paid dividends for him and the blessings that he's received in his life. But I can tell you where I'd find my father at 6 in the morning, and I can tell you where I'd find him at 9 at night. It was in the living room, kneeled down, praying for his family. He's always been very instrumental, and I think to this day, at my age, even 49, you always want to make your parents proud. Right. If your parents are around, your parents see you, And, he pops his chest out a little bit.
Right.
My son's the chief of police.
Right.
And so that's proud for me. It makes me feel good. And I know my parents are very proud of that. I had a good friend of mine. His name is Dr. Gary Neal. Dr. Gary Neal was my school resource officer at Elgin High School. He wasn't Dr. Gary Neal at the time, but Gary, great friend. I got out of the military. I ended up working with the police department, and he was one of my sergeants. And he was one of those guys that you oftentimes, you were going through something, you wanted to talk to somebody, you could trust to talk to him and mentor you. And he's been a longtime friend to this day. He's a friend, but he, in my journey to the police department, one day he tells me, "You know what, Eric? You're gonna be a sergeant in this police department one day." And he gives me his leather jacket with sergeant stripes. He gives it to me.
Yeah.
Says, "You're gonna be," way before I even thought I'd be a sergeant, or let alone anything else. He gives me that jacket. Remember, he was my school resource officer. He was a sergeant of mine. We worked alongside each other. I worked for him. The day he retired, I got promoted to sergeant.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Right? Yeah, right? And at the promotion ceremony, I had the jacket that he gave me years ago. I had it framed in the shadow box. And I presented on his retirement and my promotion ceremony, his jacket back to him. Yes.
Nice.
So
Nice.
There's pictures online of that somewhere from the news, but he's been a longtime friend to this day. I'll call him and run stuff by him. Hey, what do you think? He's also a minister, but just a great guy.
Yep.
I worked for several chiefs that really allowed me to be the face of the agency at times when I was a sergeant, or I was even just an officer, and they allowed me to grow, and I was the public information officer that really dealt, quite frankly, in the Chicagoland area with the Spanish media. So with Telemundo, Univision, and I had crazy ideas of, hey, let's go take a team to Puerto Rico. I ended up taking a team to recruit in Puerto Rico, and Univision followed us out to Puerto Rico and continued showing the news of what we were doing from here on the island. And there was just a lot of opportunities that I was blessed to be able to do, but it wasn't, I had people who allowed me to do that, allowed the creativity, allowed that freedom, and there was no ego with them. It was okay.
Right.
And so that's what you learned out of the way, is like, there's no ego. Like, do you have a talent and a skill that'll help bridge our communities? Let's go with it. I don't have to be the face of it. We're working together to build these relationships and build trust. And so my last chief I had is Anna Lally, who's in Elgin still. She's the chief that promoted me to a command level, and I'm very thankful that she did that. And there were so many things that I learned from her, and really, again, the appreciation of working under her leadership in a field that's dominated by males, right? And her perspectives and our real conversations that we were having, and these various chiefs that I, to this day, hey Anna, I gotta, bounce stuff off of each other. She may call and bounce something off of me. I'll bounce something off of her, and some other chiefs that I worked for before as well. And so those have been people in my path that have really helped form me. Amongst everybody else, I think, just anybody that you've worked with, any other supervisor, good or bad, you see things that you say, well, I don't want to do it that way, but I like this. I think you learn from the good and the bad. Right. And you kind of mold who you're going to be in this field as a law enforcement leader, and create, who am I? What did I like? What didn't I like? You often learn more from what you don't like. Right.
I agree with you. I think that's in life in general. I know you are an advocate for social justice, and a lot of that has to do with where you come from and how you grew up and the things you've seen and experienced. And then since you've been in law enforcement, you've had a number of issues that have kind of garnered national attention, such as George Floyd and things of that nature. So Talk to me about your stance on social justice and how the George Floyd incident in particular impacted you in law enforcement.
Well, I have 4 children, and they all look very distinct. Well, my oldest son, who's 29, if you see him, he's a black male. My 2 daughters, one of them's a little fairer than the other, and the other one's a little bit darker. And some people think she's African American or a mix of something.
Yeah.
Which obviously we are. And then I have an 11-year-old son with big curly Afro hair. But when George Floyd happened, you have to remember, like, my daughters, who is 26 now, 20, were in my life as a police officer all their life. She calls me and says, "Dad, what do I do?" This is the first time that this conversation really ever comes up.
Yeah.
They like, "What do we do?" Because I've always told them, you start off, girls, you don't be fooled. You're starting off with 2 negatives. You're a female and you're Latina.
Yeah.
The only thing I have on you is that I'm a guy. So work hard, push hard, prove yourself by what you do, but know that we have to navigate a little differently.
Yeah.
When they asked me that question, it was like, "Oh my, what do I do? What do you mean, what do you do?" She goes, I feel like I'd be safe in the town that you work in the city that you work in, but what do I do somewhere else? And it really struck me. It struck me in the sense that, yeah, they're right. What do you do? And I've always told them, even me, when I'm not in uniform, I get stopped. I don't like a police car behind me. And I'm a chief of police.
Right.
And I don't like, when they pull, I leave my hands out. I roll down the windows. I turn the lights on. "Officer, what would you like me to do?" Oftentimes I'll have a gun on my waist, and so I have to let them know early.
Yeah.
"Listen, there's a gun on my waist. I'm not telling you what to do, but there's a badge that goes with it. You tell me what you need me to do." Because I know I don't look like the typical police officer.
Right. Right.
And I don't tell them I'm a police officer, but I eventually have to tell them, like, "Hey, I don't want them to do something to me." And to me, it's just, we have to treat our communities equally.
Yeah.
And I think we've lost is this balance. I talk about balance all the time. When we talk about balance, when you talk about balance in your diet, in your work life, balance of your finances, I think policing loses balance, completely loses balance between engagement and enforcement.
Yeah.
And I think when I think about it, I think it goes back to 9/11. All of a sudden, the police can't do anything wrong. They're the heroes.
Yeah.
And that got to their heads. That pendulum swung all the way this way. Then all of a sudden, George Floyd's and the other issues that came up,
Yeah.
the pendulum swung all the other way
Right,
around.
right.
Let's defund the police. Let's take we don't need them. Well, there was no definition for defund, but I understand what they meant. Let's reallocate funds to where we need to reallocate monies to and change how we're doing policing.
Yeah.
But it went the whole other way.
Right.
But then what do we see now? These high crime rates, these high numbers, vehicular hijackings, shootings that are extreme, nationwide, right? Because we've lost our balance, right? And when you think about social justice, you want to be treated fairly. I want to be treated fairly. Everybody wants equality, is what we want.
Right.
We want equality, but you also want to feel safe.
Yep.
Right?
That's
You
right.
also want to feel safe. So you don't want to lose services neither. You
Correct.
want to feel safe. And I think that's where it's at, is we have to have a balance on how here in law enforcement we are engaging and how we are enforcing. We can't just be kicking doors in and just taking everybody to jail, but we also can't just be hugging babies and crossing the elderly people across the street.
Yeah.
There's a balance that we need to have, and there's an equality that we need to have across the board. And I always say this, and I tell my staff this, and I tell those in leadership, is if you treat everybody and measure everybody with the same ruler, we're not going to have any issues, because you're getting the same, that this person who looks different than you is getting the same, and this person, because we're treating everybody the same. We gotta get past those. Everybody's got a bias, but it's how you act on those biases. Right? We gotta get past what we perceive somebody to be or who they are based on what they look like.
Right, right. So how do you feel mental health of the officers, how you feel that play a role in how they engage with the community, and what kind of steps are you doing to try to protect the mental health of your staff?
Absolutely. So we've implemented a program called We Never Walk Alone here at our police department. So we have peer mentors, but we also have mentors that you can reach out to that are not in or around this area. Because oftentimes officers don't want to talk to somebody that's here because of fear of, you're going to give me a rubber gun, you're going to put me on the desk, you're going to do this. So mental health and physical health is very, very important and at the top of the list for me. Because if you're not mentally right, if you're having issues at home, if there's things that are going on, you can't come in here and do a job the appropriate way. Right? And I often, if I had a dry erase board, I could show you, but you start off with a certain amount of stress at the beginning of the day. Now you go to a hot call, that stress goes up, and then you start to come back down. And then come to the next call and it goes up again.
Right.
It goes up. So you never get back to where you even started, and it's up here. And if we don't know how to cope with that and work through that, this is where we're up here and you say something to me that I didn't like, and now this issue becomes different.
Yeah.
Right? We're talking to you recklessly. We're saying something that's disrespectful. And that's oftentimes some of the biggest complaints we get. Is I don't like how that officer spoke to me.
Right.
It's not that the officer did A, B, or C. It's one of the biggest complaints is how the officer spoke to me. Again, we look at the suicide rates and divorce rates in law enforcement. They're very high. So for me, it's important to engage not just the officers, but engage their families in the process. One of the things that I do at the police department, every time somebody has a baby, I write a letter to the baby. Not to the parents.
Yeah.
Not to. I write a letter to the baby. It gets mailed to the baby. Yeah. It's a nice sock, and it's nice. It's got the watermark, and it talks about the parent. Talks about, hey, well, when you were born, your father or your mother worked for the Peoria Police Department, and I go on. I said, by the time you get this letter and you're able to read it, the ink's probably run, and I can tell you how many calls I've gotten from an officer saying, my wife has been crying for the last 15 or 20 minutes because of the letter that you sent our baby. Wow. You want to engage the families because we can't do this work without the support that's behind us and our families. It is a very stressful job. It's a very demanding job. We see things that the average human is not going to see. Right. And we deal with people at their worst. We don't get to, get to see them at their best. We're usually dealing with people at their worst. And we need to provide the right tools for our officers to be able to deal with that. But we also need to empower the families to know how to support that as well. Right. So you got a full holistic approach and get everybody involved. So some of the things we're working on now is renting out places and doing yoga classes for the whole family. Yeah. Some other fun events that we can incorporate the family. We do some Christmas events where we engage the families as well. One of the things that I did when I got hired here was all promotion ceremonies, we do a full ceremony with, and the family's got to come. And if you're getting promoted, be prepared to have a speech and make sure you thank your family. Yeah. And so that's what I tell them. This ain't about you. This is not about you. This promotion is not about you. It is you, but it's about everybody that supported you all the way. All the way.
Wow. Yep. So, coming from very humble beginnings, going through the ranks, becoming the chief of police, you're someone that I consider to be a self-made man. And I just want to know in your own words, what do you think that means to be self-made?
I don't know if I'm self-made, quite frankly, right? When you say self-made, yes, have I pushed myself past some limits? Yes. If I didn't push myself through school and I didn't push myself, well, let's start it early. If I didn't push myself into the military and make a decision, there was a why in my life. If I have a moment to explain this why, I have a good friend of mine that was supposed to go in the Marine Corps with me. We're going to go on a buddy system. Went to high school together, same family backgrounds. We went to the same church. We were both Puerto Rican. We both the same family, our friends. He decided to stay back and not go selling drugs and just being a criminal.
Yeah.
I left. So that was my first main decision. I left, I went to the Corps. And in that why, I took a different direction than he did. So I had to push myself past what I potentially could have been doing in the moment to go do something else, which wasn't easy, but we did it.
I'm going to say this as we get ready to close the episode. I personally think you are a self-made man, because anytime you have an individual that comes from just ordinary circumstances and they're able to push to the top of whatever their career is, or whatever they choose as a profession, that person has beat the odds. And just like so many people that grew up in our communities, we all got to that why, to that fork in the road, and we just chose a different path. And so I really want to thank you so much for being on the show, taking time out your busy schedule.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
I really admire all the things that you're doing for the citizens of Peoria, but also what you've done through your career and how you have placed the emphasis on the people that you are in charge of protecting and serving. To my viewers, I want to thank you for watching this episode of Self-Made. I'm your host, D. Brown, CEO. And remember, without you, there's no me.